This story is called The Basement Door. It was told to me by my friend's stepdad, who was quite adamant that it was indeed true, but I'll let you be the judge. The story took place in the early 90s. My friend's stepdad, we'll call Rodney, had a brother that lived across town. One day, Rodney got a call from his brother. His brother wanted to know if he wouldn't mind house-sitting for a couple of days, as well as feeding his cats. Rodney's brother had a pretty sweet house, and it was closer to work for Rodney, so naturally, Rodney took the deal. Rodney had been to his brother's house before, but they were brief visits. The house was nice and was in the good part of town, but it was old. Rodney went over the day that they agreed on, and he got a tour of the house. While on the tour, Rodney was shocked to find that the house had a basement. The basement door was indeed in the washer room, a room that Rodney had never been in before, which made perfect sense as to why he didn't know there was a basement. They both descended into the dark basement. Once they got to the bottom, Rodney's brother reached up and pulled on one of those chain lights to light the basement. The basement was illuminated with a dull yellow glow. There wasn't much in this basement. It was unfinished for the most part and was kinda creepy. Aside from a few boxes, the basement was pretty much empty, all but a random door in the basement. It was a small door, not quite full size, and it didn't have a door handle. Rodney said while in the basement that he felt extremely uncomfortable and very uneasy. He said also that his attention was especially drawn towards that small door in the basement. He even remembers asking his brother what that door led to. His brother responded that he never was able to open that door and that he shouldn't worry about it. Anyways, they went upstairs and continued the tour. Rodney's brother then left and Rodney had the whole house to himself. Rodney helped himself to his brother's food inside his fridge. A couple of hours later, while watching football, Rodney heard a strange sound coming from inside the house. What the hell was that? He thought to himself. It was clearly the sound of a door opening, but he wasn't sure which one. He briefly checked the doors leading to the outside. None of them were opened. Rodney then checked the doors inside the house. Rodney finally found the door that made that sound and was terrified. The basement door was wide open. Rodney briefly looked down into the dark basement and was spooked. He quickly closed the door and tested the locking mechanism on it. He just passed off the door opening as no big deal. He would soon come to regret this. A couple hours later, around 11, the same sound happened again. Rodney quickly went to the washroom and saw the basement door, wide open again. This time, instead of looking into the dark basement, Rodney promptly closed the basement door, placing a big bag of cat food behind it. Surely, this should keep the door closed. And for the most part, it did. It was starting to get late, and Rodney had to work in the morning. Rodney then went to bed and told me about this crazy dream that he had. The dream was from a third-person perspective, as if he was watching himself outside of his body. During the dream, a woman came crawling into the room, dressed in all black, her hair covering her face. Rodney watched helplessly from the third-person perspective, not being able to do anything. The dream then seems to flash forward. Rodney and this lady in black are now in the basement. The woman doesn't say anything during the dream, but Rodney knows that she wants him to open the door in the basement. She reaches out to touch Rodney on the face, and Rodney wakes up from his dream. Rodney's awake, but he doesn't know where he is. He's somewhere very dark, and he feels cold pavement on his feet. His eyes soon adjust, and he's able to see a brief light coming from above. It finally clicks in his mind where he is. Rodney is in the basement. Naturally, Rodney sprints up the stairs, terrified. He goes to push on the door and finds resistance on it. He keeps pushing harder and finds that the bag of cat food was still behind the door. During all of this, Rodney felt an extreme evil presence coming from the basement. Rodney finally makes his way out of the basement, closing the door behind him. After a couple of minutes of pure terror, Rodney is finally able to calm down. He checks the time and sees that it's 4:30. Rodney has to be at work at 6:30, so he decides to stay up the rest of the night. He is able to reflect upon his dream and the events that happened the night before. He just figures that he sleptwalked down into the basement and somehow closed the door behind him so that the cat food would still be there. Rodney even thought that it was comical at this point, thinking that he just spooked himself so badly just because he sleptwalked into the basement. Soon enough, Rodney had to go to work, so he did. During the day, however, Rodney found himself a couple of times thinking about the house. Rodney was dreading having to go back there, but didn't want to disappoint his brother after he promised him that he'd watch his cats. Soon enough, 5 o'clock came around and Rodney had to go back to that house. Rodney walked into the house to find that the cat food that was blocking the basement door was now everywhere. Rodney naturally just summed it up to be the cats getting into the cat food, and of course, the basement door was opened. Rodney then specifically went out and got a couple of beers, hoping that this would calm his nerves. He also stopped at a grocery store, picking up a rubber stopper to place behind the basement door, preventing it from opening. Whatever was going on inside the house, this should surely be the solution. And for the most part, it was. When Rodney got back to his brother's place, he quickly put the stopper behind the basement door and tried a couple of times to open the basement door. No luck. Feeling proud for his solution, Rodney figured the only way to celebrate would be to drink all of his brother's beer. While in the other room watching TV, he could have sworn a couple of times that he heard the basement door shake a little bit, as if someone in the basement was trying to get out. It even got to the point that he was sure of it, that there was someone definitely in the basement. But of course, when he checked, there was no one there. It was 11:30, and Rodney debated on whether to stay or not. Rodney then decided to stay, considering that he was pretty drunk from all the beer from earlier. He got ready for bed and fell asleep. While he was sleeping, he had another terrifying dream. He dreamed that someone had thrown him into a well and that he was drowning. The dream then flashed forwards, and he's back in the basement. He is able to see the woman in black much better. Her body is bloated, and her hair and body are wet. She is pointing to the small door in the basement. Rodney then wakes up from his dream, and again, he's confused as to where he is, but quickly realizes that he's back in the basement. This time, instead of having a light to guide him, he's in complete darkness. Rodney begins to panic and starts to feel around. He's able to feel boxes. He knows that the box is on the far side of the basement, meaning that he's pretty deep in. Rodney then feels the chain from the light above on his head. Now this is the part of the story I'm not quite sure that I believe. Rodney told me that when he pulled on the chain, the light illuminated the basement, and he was able to see what was going on. Right next to him was the small door, and it was wide open. Inside the door was an arm extended out, trying to grab him. The arm much resembled the arm of the lady in his dreams. At this point, Rodney takes off up the stairs and practically breaks down the door, trying to get it open. Instead of staying the rest of the night in the house, he takes off for his own place across town. Something strange about this story was that Rodney has never sleptwalked before, and hasn't since. But that's not the scary part. When Rodney's brother comes back into town, they meet up together and discuss what had happened. Rodney shares with us that his brother had been experiencing the same thing that he had. Rodney asked his brother what was in that small room that was behind the small door. The answer is quite chilling. The small room had a well that one of the previous tenants had fell into and died. The person that fell in was a young woman.